Alright, so not to be presumptuous in this video, but I wanted to kind of express my own, I guess part of it is frustration. I feel like when it comes to childlikeness, I feel like we have all these labels. There's no label. If we look into what children do, they just act, a lot of it is mostly subconscious related. But that's why children are good at many things. Because they're just playing. They're having fun. They're enjoying life as it is. And then we so-called smart adults, we so-called we know more than they do because we have all these things. We know blah 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 blah, and the list goes on, the excuses go on, and the unconscious behavior goes on, and all that stuff. I sound a bit like I'm against unconscious behavior. It's not really that. I'm more like I do have resentment because it's a feeling of like why? I don't understand it. Like for me, I just personally don't understand it. Why is it that we question children? And I've done that myself too. The children that I've taught before. But the thing is, there's a difference between the children that I've taught that are much younger and those the ones that have started to develop their own ego, that have started to develop unconscious behaviors because they mimic their parents. They have this attachment. I call it the parent-God syndrome. Where we believe that our parents are gods, right? We believe that our parents are like these, so we follow them because for fear of our own safety and security and the roof over our heads, the food on our table, even money is probably part of that later. But anyways, some sort of form of survival, tools for survival, right? So, but the children that I've worked with before that was very young, I just knew how to have fun with them. Even though there was a part of the ego going in, especially as an adult, there's why can't they get this? Da da da. But it's like, no, let that go. So I tried to get out of my own way and do all that stuff, right? But one of the things I noticed is that when it comes to childlikeness, it's not so much that it's something that is a fact, but I notice, I don't know, I get this strong sense that because of the labels we have as people, like as adults, especially as once we start to develop the ego or this false identity, that we feel that even childlikeness in children has to have a specific appearance, meaning that being childlike means it's always nice and they cannot cry, they cannot get mad, they have to be pleasant and cute and so adorable, Disney stuff, right? I wouldn't say necessarily Disney, but kind of like that whole we call I guess I could call it like Disney syndrome, right? We have to call it it has to be a certain way. We have to put it in a box. Vogue, 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 Vogue. Right? So there's a perfect example of just being childlike. I just have fun with it. Who cares? Don't give a fuck about what other people think. Don't give a fuck about not only what other people think. It's not being against people. It's more like don't give it to the whole perception that it's it has to be a certain way. And that's one of the things I'm still learning myself, right? Why is it that I have a certain way? So as you grow into consciousness, as you become more aware of these things, it's not even about anything else but just being. It's not even about this idea that it's being conscious means I have to really know it. Being conscious means I have to do this practice. Being conscious means I have to be in a spiritual community. Being conscious means I must meditate 5 times a day. It's this way. It's wow. No wonder we have a lot of trouble trying to grasp all these things, because we're so conditioned from at least the last 2,000 years of being submissive. And I'm going to tie this in with astrology because I am an astrologer. When I say I'm an astrologer, I don't mean that as in an identification. Maybe part of it is, but I can sense it. And I know this is going to sound like showing off for some people. If it triggers you, it triggers you. My intention is not to trigger you. My intention is to show you that what I know is from my experience. So when it comes to my astrology, the name behind the thing we call it in terms of the. So now I lost my train of thought. See, when it comes to overthinking, this is what happens. This is the what you, I guess you can call it the curse, but it's not something we should resist, right? The ego is there to help us to survive, but we can go beyond that. We can accept that there's the ego itself and the things that the destructive things it's created, but it's also beautiful things that it has created, like the things the forms that have created itself, the things that we could use today, right? We can use all of these things as tools, as limited as they are, as stumbly makey they are. Like, for example, like having certain sharp edges of tables, look, all these compartmentalizations, it feels very constricting. At least for me, it feels very constricting. So when it comes to like those kind of things, I say, okay, well, there's a constriction, that means it makes me more conscious. See, this is a funny thing. It's a kind of a paradox. The ego creates all these things, the ego creates all these things and these things, but it creates a lot of things. Like some simple examples would be like so many things, so many wastes that we've created, limitations and borders and all that stuff. But that in itself makes us conscious and becomes aware that, oh, that means we're just like, oh, so that means that if I'm hoarding things, if I'm worried about money, then being aware of that is already making you conscious, right? That's the process itself, right? We cannot know consciousness unless we know we have experienced unconsciousness, or at least when we start getting tired of unconsciousness, like, what is going on here? Like, why am I not happy? Right? We think happiness is certain things, right? So going back to this whole thing, it goes back around, I guess, full circle in a way, to childlikeness. Your children are not worried about things. Some people might say, like, well, they need toys all the time. Do they? Did we need actual toys all the time? Do we need replacement of toys all the time? There's nothing to do with the toys themselves. It's about the experience itself. The reason we give toys to children is because we think that that's what's going to satisfy them. We have this perception, this label that children need toys all the time, that they need some sort of like nurturing all the time. What they really need is, yes, nurturing, but it's not in a form. It's not things. It's they need to explore. They need to learn, explore the world, directly as it is, right? Directly as it is, right? And when I say children, I mean like between the ages of 0 and 7, because they're what you call, apparently it's what's referred to as the formative years. Okay, so there's a lot of things that come off very vague and kind of uncertain. It's tied to uncertainty, because when we're children, there is no label. Like, children really at that age, between 0 and 7, they have no concept of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, separation. There's no concept of that. They learn those concepts. They learn those things from past unconsciousness. I wouldn't necessarily say adults, but kind of, yes. But they learn it from people like us, from who have been unconscious, right? But that's changing. So the way to go about it ourselves, who were unconscious, who have gone through that mode of unconsciousness, that phase throughout thousands of years and thousands and thousands and thousands of years, to get back into something that is so simple that it's so simple, but it's really hard, right? Yes. Because childlikeness has nothing to do with appearance. Childlikeness isn't a perception of like, it has to be this way. It has to be, Google Gaga. It has to be, it has to be like innocence. It has to be, no, children get angry too. But that anger isn't like anger that we perceive it as. It's not resentment. It's not holding a grudge. It's not any of the things that we perceive as like manipulating us. It's not any of those things. Even if they were to feel like they have like a manipulative behavior, it's not manipulation. It is the use of the function so that they flow a bit more, because when they see a limitation, or rather when they see an imposition of something that is unconscious, okay, an unconscious imposition, an imposition of unconscious concepts or whatever functions themselves. Children are conscious, or between 0 and 7. They're very conscious. They're very just like in the present moment. So what happens is when we say something like, don't do this, you cannot cry, stop crying, be a big boy, that's one of the most damaging things we can do. They see that and they don't understand it. But because they're conscious, their consciousness is all encompassing and accepting, and it's present. Once they start accepting that and absorbing, this is why we call them sponge. We refer to children in that age, especially at that age, those ages 0 to 7, as like sponges. Because what is nature? Like when you chop off a tree from its trunk, is the tree going to avenge you? Is it going to avenge itself? Is it going to hurt you? No. It has its own defense mechanism. Same thing with other animals, right? A defense mechanism is a defense mechanism. But when when unconscious behavior starts to grow, the ego comes in and there's false identity, that defense mechanism becomes something else. It's as if it's like, oh, I am the unconscious. Oh, I am the defense mechanism. Right? So this ties into the childlikeness that we think we have lost, because we believe that the unconscious and the defense mechanism, therefore the ego, is our identity. That's who we are. Childlikeness it's not even any of that stuff. Childlikeness is not even the concept of child, not even of like and the ness of it. It's not any of that stuff. It is being, period. It is being, period. Now people are probably wondering still today, a lot of people are, how do I go about this? Surrender. Surrender to the powerlessness. Surrender to the unknown. Surrender to all of it. I'm not saying yes, be a doormat, but you'll know when your limits are, you know when your limits are there. You know when you have to, when it feels like this is not feeling connected. But once you start to feel like, Matt Kahn put it really well. He said that, what did he say? The ego will feel like bullying. The ego will feel like you feel constricted rather than free. The ego will want constriction rather than freedom. So for example, like when let's say I don't want something. I don't want, I don't know, something like, what's a good example? So let's say I didn't want my parents I wanted my parents to work with a certain schedule of mine. If I were to push them and say, like, why don't you adhere to my schedule? Why don't you like call me when I ask you to call me? That's a lot of that will feel like ego, because I am imposing my own desires onto them. But if I said, like, for example, well, I don't feel good about that. I'm owning the desires. I'm owning the emotions. And when I say I'm owning the emotions, the way I understand it, or have come to understand it, is that when I'm owning the emotions, it's like saying, okay, I recognize the emotions, but I also have to honor that in order for me to flow with life, I have to also honor the basic needs that I have of being able to move whenever I feel like I can move, not so much because I just want to do whatever the fuck I wanted, but because it's like, well, I do have like this desire to do this. So I'd like my schedule to be, and then if other people don't cooperate with you, so what happens, and then you have to kind of take things into your own hands, so to speak. So what happens is that it's okay to be angry in those times, but in this case, still owning your emotions and saying, I want this one. This is what I feel will make me. It's all connected to, does it make you flow and shine and inspired? If it's not inspired, it's going to feel heavier. It's going to be the opposite. And then it's going to be more like, why you do this? Then you end up fighting and arguing with people. And then that's where it comes from. That's where the bullying feels like. The bullying comes from like that feeling that we have of like, I must constrict this, I must resist this, I must do this. So I hope that doesn't really confuse you, but really what it is like restrictions and resistance is normal because we've never really had our basic needs met. Especially if you're like, for me, I've never really had my basic needs met, especially emotionally and in depth, like really like in like really meaningful relationships. My parents were there physically, materially speaking, but they weren't there emotionally. So it was either confusing, so it was very confusing for me. I mentioned this in other videos, but it's like I have what you call like fearful avoidant personality. Like it's, I mean, among other things, right? So it's like that whole, I don't know, it's uncertain. But I've learned to lean into that uncertainty and say like, okay, well, this is uncertain, but I'm still going to honor because the body, you cannot deny that the body needs what it needs, right? It's kind of like I'm backtracking in terms of what I needed as a child and kind of reinstating that into this form, into this life, in this adult form, in this life now. It's one thing to do inner child work. It's also another thing to, well, it's connected, to work on it on a physical, material level, right? So tying this back to the whole childlikeness thing, right? It's childlikeness has nothing to do with being passive or aggressive. It's not passive aggressive either. It's not any of that stuff. It's not even about neutrality. It's just you're flowing with what feels inspired. And when there's limitation, you're just like, nope, I'm going to go this way. And then we use the anger or the energy of anger and assertiveness to say, no, I don't want that. And then we have this thing that we think is like, oh, it's evil, it's wrong, it's good, it's not bad, it's not good, it's bad. They must be angry, so they must be wrong. No, they're just angry because of that. And then it goes away. That's the energy of the anger. And somebody's sad, the same thing. And then you let it flow, you let it flow, you let it flow. We don't allow things to flow. It's not going to be childlike. It's going to be the opposite. It develops into more unconscious behavior. And that's when children start to realize that, because they've been limited, they've been constricted, they've been suppressed, they've been oppressed. So, and then we go into adulthood, or teenhood, whatever, and then go into adulthood realizing like, what the fuck, right? So, I hope that helps. See you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.